Well, after such a great introduction, I can't wait to hear the speaker myself. First of all, let me say that sometimes these accolades and honors can backfire on you. Recently, New York Magazine had a contest. Who are the 100 smartest, most intelligent people in New York? Well, I'm proud to say I made the list. I'm now officially one of New York's 100 smartest people. But in all fairness, I have to admit that Madonna also made that same list. And next year, they tell me that Lady Gaga is going to push me off the list entirely. Well, today I'm going to talk about the future. It's very dangerous to make predictions, of course. Let me quote from that great philosopher of the Western world, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra once said, quote, "Prediction is awfully hard to do, especially if it's about the future." Well, he also said that on the road to the future, if you encounter a fork in the road, then be sure to take it. Well, we are going to take that fork in the road because, you see, I've interviewed over 300 of the world's top scientists, Nobel laureates, directors of major laboratories for BBC television, the Science Channel, Discovery Channel, and my own radio show. And every time I interview these scientists, I ask them the key question, the question of all questions, the most important question of all. I ask them, is there intelligent life on the Earth? Well, I was watching the Kardashians on TV last night, and I'm now convinced, nope, there's no intelligent life on this planet. Maybe somewhere else, but not on this planet. And in my other book, Physics of the Impossible, I go not just 100 years, 500 years into the future, where we'll have starships. We'll have perhaps even maybe time travel. And I answer the question, what happens if you go into a time machine and you go backwards into the past and you meet your teenage mother before you were born and she falls in love with you? Well, if your teenage mother falls in love with you before you're born, you're in deep doo-doo if that happens. And the future of the mind, I visit the laboratories where we're now using physics to unlock the secrets of the thinking brain. By looking at blood flow, we're now mapping human thought. In fact, we can now show that certain old wives' tales about the brain are actually true. For example, here's an old wives' tale that everyone believes, but nobody could prove until now. And that is, when a man talks to a pretty girl, he starts to act stupid. Absolutely true. We've shown that when a man talks to a pretty girl, blood drains from the prefrontal cortex, and he starts to act mentally retarded. Absolutely true. And in the future of humanity, I go even thousands of years into the future. You know, the dinosaurs did not have a space program. And that's why the dinosaurs are not here today. There are no dinosaurs here today because they never evolved to the point of space travel. And maybe one day we'll go to the moon, Mars, beyond. It's hard to say for sure, but we're on the right track at the present time. Private enterprise with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they're financing a new generation of rockets. And of course, in the book, I have to address the question, maybe we'll meet other civilizations in outer space. You know, I'm on radio, and some people call me on the phone, and they say, Professor, you're all wrong. You're wrong. The aliens are not there in outer space. They're here on the Earth. And I say, how do you know? And they say, on air, they say, well, they've been kidnapped by aliens from outer space. Well, I have some advice. The next time you are kidnapped by aliens from outer space, for God's sake, steal something. There's no law against stealing from an extraterrestrial civilization. No law whatsoever. An alien chip, an alien hammer, alien DNA, anything would solve the whole question. Well, let me begin now by answering another question. Where does wealth and prosperity come from anyway? We see all the wealth of modern society. Where did it all come from? Well, you talk to a lawyer, a lot of lawyers here at Harvard, and they say, oh, that's easy. Wealth comes from lawsuits. You sue Peter to pay Paul. But that's a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. What happens to lawyers? Well, many of them become politicians. You ask a politician, where does wealth come from? And they say, that's easy. Taxes. Tax Peter to pay Paul. But that's a zero-sum game. And then you talk to the economics department here, and you ask them, where does wealth come from? And they say, oh, that's easy. Print money. Print money and let your grandchildren pay off your debt. Simple. Well, I'm a physicist. I believe that wealth and prosperity come from science and technology. But you see, science and technology comes in waves. It doesn't come all at once. The first wave was about 200 years ago. We physicists worked out what is called thermodynamics, the laws of heat. We could calculate using Newtonian theory from a lump of coal how much energy is required to drive a locomotive, to drive a steam engine. And that initiated the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden, we had wealth beyond human imagination. An agrarian society was suddenly turned into an industrial one. And then 80 years after that, Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell worked out the laws of electricity and magnetism. And that launched us into the electric age. 80 years after that, we physicists worked out the quantum theory. And that gave us transistors, lasers, the wonders that you see in your living room, in your cell phone, in your TV set, all of that. Here's the question for today. If the first revolution was steam power, if the second revolution was electricity, if the third revolution was the quantum theory and the computer, what is the fourth and fifth wave of wealth generation which is going to turn society upside down? I say the fourth wave is physics at the molecular level. That is, artificial intelligence as we go down to the neuron level, nanotechnology and biotechnology. And then the question is, what is the fifth wave? We're not talking about mid-century to late 21st century. What is the fifth wave? I claim that the fifth wave is physics at the atomic level. First of all, we have fusion power. A glimmer in the hope of every physicist. We think we will commercialize fusion power by mid to late century. And that diagram, by the way, I should say, was made by this company, 3DS. 3DS has pioneered the graphics that energize much of society, including this one right there. Below that, quantum computers. You know, we have something called Moore's Law. Computer power doubles every 18 months. That's why we have the computer revolution of today. But you know, Moore's Law is slowing down. One day soon, it will collapse. Silicon Valley could become a rust belt sooner than you realize. The wealth of nations could be disrupted when Moore's Law collapses. Who knows when, 5, 10, 15 years, we're not sure. But after that, we have to go to a new generation of computers. Atomic computers, DNA computers, optical computers, quantum dot computers, and we're not ready. We're not ready for them. And we're now going to go down to the atomic level of the brain itself. What is the future of the internet? The future of the internet is BrainNet. Instead of sending digital, we will send emotions, feelings, memories. The first memories were sent on the internet 2 years ago. We've done it. In fact, we can now photograph dreams. I'll tell you how we photograph dreams in another slide. So we're talking about BrainNet, which is going to revolutionize everything. Who's going to want to watch TV? TV and movies, nothing but a flat screen with sound. That's all it is. It hasn't changed in 50 years. with BrainNet, think about it. Teenagers, instead of putting a happy face on the end of every sentence, will put the emotion, the memory, after the end of every sentence. But let's talk about the industrial age, and now not the next 50 years, but the next 20 years. First of all, oil. Oil and fossil fuels powered the industrial age. What will power the information age? The information age is powered by data. Data will gradually replace oil in terms of the currency of the future. But oil has to be processed into crude oil. It has to be processed by refineries. Same thing with data. Data has to be homogenized. It has to be analyzed by analytics. And then, once we have the data, we can then visualize these things. What I'm saying is something very simple. Almost all areas of human endeavor, almost any industry, any field, will eventually be computerized, digitized, and visualized. We're talking about take an industry, any industry. It'll be digitized. It'll be analyzed with analytics, and it'll be visualized using virtual reality and the technologies that we're going to see. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to challenge you to solve these following challenges for the future. So I'm going to challenge you to find a solution using virtual reality, using analytics, using big data for the future. The first challenge is, can we simulate life itself? Already in the operating table, doctors can put the internet right there in their glasses, download MRI scans, download everything. In fact, in medical school, the human body is now being digitized so that you don't have to dissect. In fact, operations now, this is the Da Vinci, we're using robots to do the operations. And pretty soon, the robot will do the entire operation. We will visualize the human body, visualize the operation, push a button, and the operation will be done by robots. And so we're talking about robotic surgery, the application of artificial intelligence that's going to change the way we view medicine. And AI is good for pattern recognition. Today, if you were to have a contest between a doctor reading MRI scans, PET scans, and what have you, and a robot, the robot is better almost in any test, head to head. Robots will identify cancer. They'll identify early onset Alzheimer's. They'll identify maladies of the human body better than a human. Now, does that mean we're going to replace the human? No. Ultimately, a human has to make the final call. Only a human can make the judgment of life and death. But the drudgery of having to analyze all the X-ray charts, the tedium of analyzing thousands of chemicals for chemical plants, the tedium of analyzing all this raw data will be done by robots. And virtual reality, well, some people say virtual reality is for children, isn't it? You put on goggles, you see a cartoon, and you laugh. No. We will have virtual reality almost in every endeavor of human activity. Scientists will be able to walk right through a DNA molecule. If you're an architect, you'll simply look and visualize what you are designing and walk through it. So in every aspect of life, we're going to be using virtual reality to visualize complex phenomena. And if you don't like goggles, we'll put them in your contact lens. So this is the future of the internet in the coming years. You will blink and you will be online. And who were the first people to buy internet contact lenses? College students taking final examinations. College students in my class will blink and see the periodic chart, see the amino acids. They'll see all the trigonometric formulas right there in their contact lens. These contact lenses will also recognize people's faces. When you bump into somebody, you'll see a biography right next to their image. And if they speak to you in Chinese, it'll translate Chinese into English. We already have simultaneous language programs that are comparable to UN translators' accuracy. So you'll be able to understand who you're talking to and what language they're talking about. This is very important. Tonight, let's say you're at a cocktail party, and there's some very important clients at that cocktail party, but you don't know who they are. In the future, you will know exactly who to suck up to at any cocktail party. And let's say you're on a blind date, and your date says that he's single, he's rich, he's available, he's the perfect date. But your contact lens says, no, he's a loser, 3 times divorced, paying child support payments. This could be very useful in the future. And living in the future will be like living in the holodeck in Star Trek. You'll be able to walk into a room, snap your fingers, and transport yourself into outer space, on the moon, on Mars, on a vacation spot. You'll be able to create reality to your own specifications. And that's challenge number 1, was to digitize and visualize life itself. Challenge number 2, and this is very practical now. Can we make supersonic jets without sonic booms? Well, what happened to the Concorde? I flew on the Concorde once years ago. It was fantastic. We broke the sound barrier. I didn't feel a thing when we broke the sound barrier. But what happened to the Concorde? The sonic boom killed the Concorde. Nobody wanted their windows to be shattered when the Concorde sailed overhead. Now, why is that? Because back in the 1960s and 70s, our cell phones, our computers were not very powerful. We couldn't model supersonic airflow. You realize that your cell phone today has more computer power than all of NASA in 1969 when we put 2 men on the moon. They had 64K processors in those NASA videotapes that you see on TV. Your cell phone has more computer power than all of NASA. So that technology was used for the SST. But now, NASA has asked the major companies to come up with specific designs by 2025. In fact, the British already have a working design on the table. What's the difference? The difference now is that we have supercomputers. We can model supersonic airflow to a degree, highly nonlinear, very, very difficult to model, but we have supercomputers that will give us supersonic transports either without a sonic boom or with a highly diminished sonic boom. They tell me that it's like a vacuum cleaner going overhead in terms of the sound. So here's a challenge. The challenge is to make supersonic jets without sonic booms. And then, even beyond that, hypersonic jets. Who's interested in that? The Pentagon, the Russians, the Chinese. Last March, Vladimir Putin announced that the Russians have a new weapon that has caught America off guard. And that is the hypersonic glide vehicle. It's a vehicle that can maneuver at Mach 5 to Mach 20, maneuver as it enters into the atmosphere, evading a Star Wars program. The Russians know they cannot compete with America when it comes to Star Wars. We're way ahead of them in terms of Star Wars technology. So why not simply evade your Star Wars shield by making your systems maneuverable? Well, the United States tried that 2 years ago and gave up. These are highly unstable, highly erratic rockets coming in at Mach 5 to Mach 20, zigzagging as they enter the atmosphere, and they crash. So the United States government has now reversed itself and said, nope, we're going to go back. The Russians have it, the Chinese are working on it, and yes, the United States is also working on it. A very difficult modeling problem. Modeling at hypersonic velocities, up to 20 times the speed of sound. And by the way, I should also point out that some people think that the testing of all these hypersonic devices is the reason why we have so many UFO sightings everywhere. The UFOs, we think, are nothing but hypersonic devices being tested by the Russians, the Chinese, and the Americans. Well, challenge number 3. Here's a challenge for you. Last month, we had Hurricane Dorian in Japan. Just a few days ago, Japan was devastated by the biggest typhoon to hit Japan since 1958. 5 million people were asked to evacuate in Japan just last week. What's the problem? The problem is that we can look at the hydrodynamics of hurricanes. That's not the problem. We have the equations of hydrodynamics. The problem is even the slightest perturbation. Small perturbations can make the hurricane wobble in all directions. So we have cones of probability. Cones. We don't know where the hurricane is actually going to hit. This is a billion-dollar question. Lives are at stake. Billions of dollars in property damage are at stake when a hurricane hits a populated area. And it's just a question of visualization and computer science. Small perturbations add up to divert the direction of a hurricane. Here's challenge number 4. See if you can figure this one out. Can we simulate a super battery? Now, why is that important? 100 years ago, believe it or not, Thomas Edison and Henry Ford were good friends. They would vacation together, and they had a friendly bet. The bet was, what is going to energize the future? Henry Ford said, it's gasoline. Thomas Edison said, no, it's the battery. Well, the newspapers, of course, said the answer is obvious. Such an obvious answer. Edison is going to win. Why is that? Because who wants to die in a fiery car accident in flames with gasoline? Second of all, who wants to have a gasoline station in every block? And so people said, hands down, Edison is going to win. Wrong. Today, we have a gas station in every block. Every block, we have a gas station. And you know, every day, somebody dies in a horrible, horrible car accident in flames. But what happened? The problem is batteries do not obey Moore's law. We've been spoiled by Moore's law. We think that everything doubles in power every 18 months. Well, nope. That's not the way it is with solar and wind power. So why don't we have the solar era? We've been talking about the solar age for decades. For decades, we keep saying, it's coming. It's coming. It never comes. It's still not totally competitive with oil and coal. What's the problem? The problem is twofold. One, you have to install solar and wind power. But second of all, the battery. We forget that. Every year, solar cells become more efficient. Every year, turbines become cheaper. Every year, we make incremental inroads. What's the problem? Installation costs and the battery. That's why Elon Musk and others are now jumping in to perfect the super battery, so that when the sun doesn't shine and the winds don't blow, you have power. Utilities are interested because utilities have to meet peak summer and peak winter demand. That's a waste. Think about it for a moment. Utilities have to make peak summer just for a few days and peak winter capacity just for a few days. People demand it. Well, with a super battery, you don't have to worry about that because you can even out all the cycles of the utility. Here's challenge number 5. Can we simulate our dreams and print them out? This is the ultimate dream. Artists would love it. You simply think of something and have it printed out. Designers would love this. Architects, you think of something and then it's printed out on a 3D printer. Believe it or not, it's possible. At the University of California at Berkeley, They take the brain, put it in an MRI scan, and they scan 30,000 pixels, 30,000 dots of blood flow in the living brain when you focus on something. Then a software program analyzes these 30,000 dots and prints out a picture of what you are thinking about. On the top, we see Steve Martin, the actor. Below that, we see an image cobbled together from 30,000 pixels of blood flow with a computer program. And this is only 30,000 pixels. Think of what happens when we have millions of them. This means that in the future, when you wake up in the morning, you'll push a button and watch the dream that you had the previous night. Just don't tell your wife or husband what you saw in that dream. We will photograph a dream. In fact, we can already do it. I've seen the pictures. They're kind of not that good yet, but it's only a matter of time. So this is the future of art. You visualize something, and then you print it out on a 3D printer. Those shoes, by the way, in the bottom are so good, they were printed out at a shoe store as you waited for them. So you go to a shoe store, have your feet measured, come back in a few hours, and they have the shoe right there, customized for your own feet. And when you get married, we can now use metals on 3D printers, and you'll design your own wedding ring right there in your own living room. This is how we will celebrate Christmas in the future. Instead of elbowing all the other shoppers at the toy store, no, we'll simply be able to download the blueprint of the toy and print it out in your living room. Next, challenge number 7. Can we simulate the living brain? It turns out that just a few months ago, scientists were able to analyze the brain of a fruit fly, cut it up, reassemble it in a computer. We now know the architecture, the complete neuronic architecture of the fruit fly with 100,000 neurons. It's only a matter of time before we do that with the human brain with 100 billion neurons. That'll take maybe several decades. But yeah, the digitization of the human mind. Optogenetics may pave the way. We can put the gene called opsin inside a cell. Opsin is reactive to light. It absorbs a photon and shoots out electricity. That way, we've been able to shortcut this whole process and map the brain of a fruit fly and a mouse much quicker than we previously thought. So we will be able to map the human brain, and we'll be able to send memories on the internet. It turns out that with mice, when mice perform certain tasks, we look at the hippocampus shown here, tape record the signals across the hippocampus, and then replay the signals back into the mouse months later, and the mouse remembers the previous memory. We can now send this on the internet. This is now being experimented with monkeys, recording memories in monkeys. What's next? Alzheimer's patients. The goal is to create a brain chip, a brain pacemaker, so that Alzheimer's patients will push a button and have memories come floating into their mind. So this could eventually, not in the near term, but eventually give us BrainNet. BrainNet is perhaps the internet of the future. You walk into a room, think, send emails, download pictures, watch movies, think, just like in a Harry Potter movie. And challenge number 8, Moore's Law will eventually collapse. I'm sorry about that. Silicon Valley could become a Rust Belt. This means that we may have to go to quantum computers. We will compute on atoms, individual atoms, rather than silicon chips. But we're not ready yet. This is a very difficult problem. I was just in Russia last week, and yeah, the Russians are working on this, but they realize too it's a very difficult problem. By mid-century, perhaps we'll have the first quantum computers that can break any computer code on the planet Earth. And the next, challenge number 9, can we digitize ourselves? Silicon Valley is now offering the possibility of digitizing your parents. Commercially, digitizing your parents. Today, when your parents die, what do you have left? A watch, a ring. That's all you have left, and maybe an album of pictures. Why not digitize your loved ones? So when they die, they will live forever. This is perhaps the library of the future. When you take a book out about Winston Churchill, that's nice, learning about Winston Churchill. In the future, you'll talk to Winston Churchill. In fact, I would love to talk to Einstein. I would love the opportunity to talk to a digitized, holographic version of Einstein. All his notes, diaries, press releases, videotapes, all of that condensed. And this is a form of immortality, digital immortality. And what are we going to do once we digitize a human being? This is my personal preference. I think we should shoot it into outer space. Put it on a laser beam. In 1 second, you're on the moon. In 20 minutes, you're on Mars. In 8 hours, you're on Pluto. And you can have breakfast in New York in the morning, visit the moon for brunch, then go on to Mars for lunchtime, visit a few asteroids in the afternoon, and come back to New York at night. So we're talking about what I call laser porting to the stars. Laser porting the digital version of yourself at the speed of light around the universe. And then challenge number 10, the last challenge, is the universe itself a simulation? I don't think so, but there is some debate among scientists. Now, I'm going to end now and ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a question now. How many of you, late at night, just before you go to sleep, have you ever had that weird feeling that maybe, just maybe, life is an illusion? Ever had that weird feeling late at night? Maybe you're the only real person, and life is a simulation, and it's an illusion, life. Raise your hand. Come on, be honest. Raise your hand. Oh, my God, you're crazy. You're crazy. How can you be the only person when I'm the only person in the universe? You realize I'm in New York right now, just about to go to sleep, thinking I'm before this august, distinguished audience? Come on, give me a break. And let me end on one last story. Let me just say a few things about myself. When I was a child, I had a role model. My role model was Albert Einstein. And let me tell you my favorite Einstein story. When Einstein was an old man, he was tired of giving the same talk over and over again. So one day his chauffeur came up to him, and the chauffeur said, "Professor, I'm really a part-time actor. I've heard your speech so many times, I've memorized it. So why don't we switch places? I will put on a mustache. I will put on a wig. I will be the great Einstein. You can put on my jacket and be my chauffeur." Well, Einstein loved the joke. So they switched places. Well, this went along famously until one day, in the back, a mathematician asked a very difficult question. And Einstein thought, oh, the game is up. But then the chauffeur said, that question is so elementary that even my chauffeur here can answer it for you. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. Thank you.